In a nation built on sacrifice, buried truths can shake the foundations of power. One mother's grief, one dog's instinct, and one soldier's return from a grave will uncover a conspiracy that threatens to destroy everything they fought to protect. This is a story of Captain Jim Carter and the secrets that refuse to stay buried. Chapter 1: The Empty Grave. The late afternoon sun cast a pale golden glow over Arlington, Virginia, on May 24, 2025. Arlington National Cemetery, the hallowed resting place of countless American heroes, stood silent under sky tinged with dusk. Rows of white headstones gleamed faintly, stretching endlessly across the rolling hills, a solemn testament to sacrifice. A soft wind rustled through the trees, whispering tales of valor and loss that lingered in the air. Sarah Carter, a widowed woman in her late 50s, knelt before a grave. Her trembling hands placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums on the cold stone, etched with the words, Captain James Jim Carter, 1993 to 2024, fallen in service to country. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks, soaking the crumpled handkerchief she clutched. A year ago, Sarah received the devastating news that Jim, her only son, had died during a covert Special Forces mission. No details, no final farewell, just a curt death certificate stating sudden cardiac arrest during duty. Beside Sarah lay Max, a German shepherd who had been Jim's loyal companion through grueling training and dangerous missions. His black and tan coat shimmered faintly in the fading light, but his deep brown eyes were fixed on the headstone, heavy with sorrow. Max was still, as if sharing Sarah's grief. She stroked his head gently, her voice breaking. Jim, my boy, it's been a year, and I still can't believe you're gone. She choked back a sob, clutching her chest. I miss you so much. Max let out a soft whimper, nuzzling her hand as if to comfort her. Sarah sat there, recounting small moments to Jim, the garden she tended at home, the dreams where he returned, smiling as he always had. The wind grew sharper, carrying a chill that felt like an omen. As Sarah stood to leave, she tugged gently on Max's leash. Come on, Max, time go. But Max didn't move. He remained rooted, eyes locked on the grave, ears pricked. Sarah frowned, tugging again. Max, let's go. To her shock, Max growled, a low, uneasy rumble. Suddenly, he began pawing at the grave, his sharp claws tearing into the grass. Dirt flew in all directions, and the sound of his nails scraping stone sent chills down Sarah's spine. She shouted, Max, stop it! What are you doing? Max ignored her. His barks echoed through the cemetery, each one sharp and anguished, like a cry for help. Nearby mourners paused, whispering among themselves. What's wrong with that dog? Barking like that in a place like this? An elderly man muttered, Dogs howling in a cemetery, that's a bad sign. Sarah's hand shook, tears spilling anew. She clutched the bouquet, whispering, Jim, if you're out there, give me a sign. At that moment, a tall man in a military jacket approached. It was Mike Torres, Jim's best friend and fellow soldier. He'd come to pay his respects, but the scene before him stopped him cold. Max was still digging, fur bristling, eyes wild with determination. Sarah turned to him, voice trembling. Mike, Max, it's like he's possessed. He keeps barking, clawing at Jim's grave. Mike crouched beside Max, studying the dog and then the grave. He'd seen Max's loyalty to Jim in the field. Through gunfire and chaos, Max never faltered. This wasn't normal. A knot of unease tightened in Mike's chest. Sarah, tell me everything, he said, his voice calm but firm. Sarah recounted Jim's mysterious death. A year ago, the Army delivered a death notice claiming Jim suffered a heart attack during a classified mission. No report, no body to see, just a sealed coffin returned to them. Mike's jaw tightened. Jim was a peak-conditioned soldier, trained to endure the toughest missions. A heart attack? It didn't add up. He looked at Max, whose paws were now bloodied from digging. "What do you know, boy?" Mike murmured, patting Max's head. Mike stood, his gaze resolute. "Sarah, we need to exhume the grave. Something's not right." Sarah froze, but a flicker of hope sparked in her eyes. Could Jim still be alive? Was there a truth buried beneath that cold earth? Mike pulled out his phone and called Emily Hayes, Jim's fiancée and a military forensic analyst. "Emily, get to Arlington National Cemetery now. It's urgent." His tone was sharp. On the other end, Emily hesitated only a moment before replying, "I'm on my way." While waiting for Emily, Mike inspected the area around the grave. He noticed faint boot prints in grass, not civilian shoes, but military-issue boots, barely visible. He snapped photos with his phone, his instinct screaming that Jim's death was no accident. Sarah stood nearby, clutching a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. 30 minutes later, Emily arrived, a petite woman in her late 20s. Her sharp intellect shone through her focused demeanor. She flinched at Max's relentless digging, his barks piercing the quiet. "What's going on, Mike?" she asked, concern in her voice. Mike explained, pointing out the boot prints. Emily pulled out a forensic kit and carefully collected soil samples around the grave. "I'll analyze these immediately. We might find something," she said, her voice steady but grave. The three stood in silence, watching Max. The dog dug with fierce determination, as if driven to unearth a hidden truth. Emily spoke softly. "Mike, do you think, could Jim still be alive?" Mike met her gaze, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "I don't know, but Max has never been wrong. Something's off." The sky darkened, heavy clouds rolling in, signaling an approaching storm. The wind howled, carrying a sense of secrets on the verge of being uncovered. Max let out a long, mournful bark, as if urging them forward. Sarah gripped Emily's hand, tears streaming down her face. "If Jim's out there, please find my boy." Rain began to fall, heavy drops mixing with Sarah's tears. Yet, amid the downpour, a spark of hope flickered. Max, with his uncanny instincts, had opened a door to the truth. What secret lay beneath the earth? And was Jim truly gone, or was he waiting to be found? Chapter 2, The Secret of Jim. The rain poured relentlessly over Arlington National Cemetery, turning the ground into a muddy quagmire. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the air grew heavy with the scent of wet earth. Sarah Carter stood trembling, her eyes fixed on the open, empty coffin before her. The headstone bore her son's name, Captain James Jim Carter, but the grave held nothing but wilted flowers and shattered hope. Max, the loyal German shepherd, had stopped digging at the grave but now paced restlessly, his bark sharp and urgent, as if sensing something beyond the rain-soaked darkness. Mike Torres, soaked to bone, crouched beside the empty coffin, his face a mask of disbelief. "This can't be right," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the storm. Emily Hayes, the forensic analyst and Jim's fiancée, clutched her toolkit, her sharp eyes scanning the scene. The boot prints Mike had found earlier, military issue, too precise for civilians, gnawed at her. She exchanged a glance with Mike, both sharing the same unspoken question. "Asterisk, where is Jim?" Sarah's voice broke through the rain, fragile but desperate. "Mike, Emily, what does this mean? Where's my boy?" Her hands clutched the rosary tighter, her tears mixing with the rain. Before Mike could respond, Max let out a piercing howl and bolted toward a wooded area behind the cemetery, his leash trailing uselessly behind him. His barks echoed, urgent and frantic, cutting through the storm. "Max!" Mike shouted, sprinting after the dog. Emily grabbed Sarah's arm, guiding her through the mud. "Come on, Sarah, we have to follow him." The trio stumbled through the underbrush, branches snapping underfoot as Max led them deeper into the shadowy grove. The dog stopped abruptly beneath a gnarled oak tree, its roots twisting into the earth like skeletal fingers. Max clawed at the ground, dirt flying, his growls low and fierce. Mike dropped to his knees beside Max, his hands joining the dog's frantic digging. He's found something. Emily shone her flashlight, illuminating the muddy patch. Sarah gasped, clutching Emily's arm. The beam caught a glimpse of fabric, a tattered piece of a military uniform. Mike's heart pounded as he dug faster, uncovering a shallow grave. And then there he was, Jim Carter, his face pale and streaked with dirt, his breathing shallow but unmistakable. He was alive. "Jim!" Sarah screamed, collapsing beside her son. She brushed the mud from his face, sobbing uncontrollably. "My boy, you're alive. Oh God, you're alive." Emily checked Jim's pulse, her hand steady despite her racing heart. "He's weak, but he's breathing. We need to get him to a hospital. Now." Mike scooped Jim into his arms, his muscles straining under the weight, and ran toward the cemetery's entrance, Max barking at his heels. Emily supported Sarah, who stumbled through the rain, whispering prayers of gratitude. At the hospital, the sterile white lights of the ICU cast harsh shadows. Jim lay on a bed, hooked to monitors that beeped steadily. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, but he was alive. Sarah sat beside him, holding his hand, her face a mix of relief and fear. Max curled up at the foot of the bed, his eyes never leaving Jim, occasionally licking his hand, as if to urge him back to life. Mike and Emily stood nearby, exhaustion etched into their faces, but their minds raced with questions. Hours later, Jim stirred. His eyes fluttered open, meeting Sarah's tearful gaze. "Mom!" he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah sobbed, pressing his hand to her cheek. "Jim, I'm here. You're safe." Emily leaned closer, her voice soft but urgent. "Jim, what happened? Who did this to you?" Jim's gaze shifted to Max, a faint smile crossing his lips. "Good boy, Max, you found me." Mike stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Jim, we found an empty coffin. Someone buried you alive. Who was it?" Jim's expression darkened, pain and anger flashing in his eyes. He took a shaky breath, his voice hoarse. "Vance. Colonel Richard Vance. He betrayed me." The room fell silent, the name hanging like a thundercloud. Colonel Vance was a high-ranking Pentagon official, respected and powerful. Emily's eyes widened. "Vance? The Colonel Vance? Why would he do this?" Jim struggled to sit up, wincing. "I was on a covert mission, investigating a black market arms ring called Shadow Syndicate. I found out Vance is their leader. He's selling weapons to rogue militias, planning something big, something to destabilize the country." Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Mike's fists clenched, his voice low. "You're saying Vance staged your death to cover it up?" Jim nodded weakly. "He drugged me, buried me alive, thought I'd never be found." He looked at Max, his voice breaking. But Max knew. He always knows. Emily's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. Those boot prints, the sealed coffin, all make sense now. They didn't want anyone to know you were still alive. She pulled out her laptop, already pulling up encrypted files from her military database. If Vance is involved, we need evidence. Hard evidence. Mike knelt beside Max, stroking the dog's fur. "You're a damn hero, Max. You saved him." Max whimpered, nuzzling Jim's hand. But the weight of Jim's words settled over them like a storm. If Vance was behind this, they were up against a powerful enemy, one with connections, resources, and no qualms about killing to protect his secrets. Jim gripped Emily's hand, his voice firm despite his weakness. We can't let him get away with this. Shadow Syndicate is planning something big, a terrorist attack, maybe worse. We have to stop them. Mike nodded, his eyes burning with resolve. We're with you, Jim, but we need a plan. Vance isn't working alone. Emily closed her laptop, her expression steely. I'll start analyzing the soil sample from the grave. If there's any trace evidence, it could lead us to where they held you. She glanced at Max, who sat alert, as if ready for battle. And Max, he's our best shot at tracking Vance. Sarah wiped her tears, her voice steadying. Whatever it takes, I want justice for my son. For all of us. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, but the storm in their hearts was just beginning. Jim looked at his team, his mother, his fiancée, his best friend, and his loyal dog. They were all he had, and they were enough. As the hospital room grew quiet, Max suddenly stood, his ears pricked. He growled softly, staring at the door. Mike tensed, his hand instinctively moving to the holster at his hip. Emily's eyes darted to the hallway, where a shadow moved briefly before vanishing. Someone was watching them. The truth was out there, but so was danger. Jim's survival was only the beginning. What was Shadow Syndicate planning? And could they stop Vance before he struck again? Chapter 3: The Hunt begins. The hospital room was bathed in the cold glow of fluorescent lights, the steady beep of monitors punctuating the silence. Captain Jim Carter lay propped up on his bed, his face still pale but his eyes burning with resolve. The revelation of Colonel Richard Vance's betrayal hung heavy in the air, a dark cloud over Jim, his mother Sarah, fiancée Emily Hayes, and best friend Mike Torres. Max, the loyal German shepherd who had saved Jim's life, lay curled at the foot of the bed, his ears pricked as if sensing the danger that loomed beyond the sterile walls. It was May 25th, 2025, just past midnight, and the storm outside had settled into a restless drizzle. Sarah gripped Jim's hand, her face etched with worry. Jim, you're barely alive. You need to rest. Jim shook his head, his voice hoarse but firm. Mom, I can't rest. Not while Vance is out there. He tried to bury me alive, and he's planning something worse. Something that could tear this country apart. Emily, seated at a small table with her laptop, nodded in agreement. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up encrypted military files. Jim's right. If Vance is running Shadow Syndicate, we're talking about a network with deep roots, arms trafficking, maybe even terrorism. We need to move fast. She glanced at the soil sample from Jim's shallow grave, now sealed in evidence bags. I'm running tests on these. If we can trace where they held you, we might find a lead. Mike paced the room, his jaw tight. Vance is a colonel in the Pentagon. He's got connections, resources, and probably eyes everywhere. We can't just walk in and accuse him. He stopped, looking at Max, who lifted his head, eyes alert. But Max! He found you, Jim. He's our edge. Jim managed a weak smile, reaching down to pat Max's head. Always has been. The group began to strategize. Emily's analysis of the soil samples suggested a rural area with clay-heavy earth, possibly in northern Virginia. Jim recounted fragments of his captivity, blindfolded, drugged, but he remembered the sound of a diesel engine and the faint smell of gunpowder. They were moving weapons, he said, big ones, military grade. I overheard Vance talking about a shipment to a militia group. Mike's eyes narrowed. A militia? That's not just trafficking, that's treason. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. I know a guy from my old unit who tracks black market deals. He might have intel on Shadow Syndicate's operations. Emily interjected. We need be careful. If Vance has spies in the Pentagon, anyone could be compromised. Sarah, who had been quiet, spoke up, her voice steady despite her fear. I don't understand all this military talk. but I know my son. Jim, you've always fought for what's right. If this Vance is a monster, you stop him. But promise me you'll come back to me. Jim squeezed her hand, his voice soft. I promise, Mom. Their planning was cut short when Max suddenly stood, growling low at the door. The group froze. Mike's hand went to his sidearm, his eyes scanning the hallway through the small window. A shadow flickered, then vanished. Someone's watching us, he whispered. Emily closed her laptop, her heart racing. We need to move, Jim. This hospital isn't safe. With the help of a sympathetic nurse, they slipped Jim out through a service exit, Max leading the way. They piled into Mike's truck and headed to a safe house in D.C., a nondescript apartment Mike used for covert ops. The city lights blurred past as they drove, the weight of their mission settling in. Inside the safe house, Emily set up her equipment, analyzing the soil samples while Mike reached out to his contact. Jim, though weak, pored over maps of Northern Virginia, circling potential locations for Shadow Syndicate's base. By dawn, Emily had a breakthrough. The soil has traces of red clay and industrial chemicals, likely from a warehouse near Manassas. There's an old munitions depot out there, abandoned but still accessible. Jim nodded, his strength returning with purpose. That's where they held me. I'd bet my life on it. Mike's contact confirmed rumors of suspicious activity at the depot. Trucks moving at night, guarded by men in unmarked gear. That's our target, Mike said, loading his gear. We go in, find evidence, and get out. No heroics until we know what we're up against. Emily packed her forensic kit, and Jim strapped on a bulletproof vest, his movement slow but determined. Max sat by the door, ready to move, his instincts sharper than ever. The drive to Manassas was tense, the early morning fog cloaking the rural roads. The depot loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of rusted warehouses surrounded by barbed wire. The group parked a mile out, approaching on foot. Max moved silently, his nose low to the ground, picking up scents. Emily whispered, "If there's anything here, Max will find it." They slipped through a gap in the fence, Max leading them to a side entrance. Inside, the warehouse was dark, the air thick with the smell of oil and metal. Crates were stacked high, some marked with military insignias. Mike pried one open, revealing assault rifles and explosives. "This is no small operation," he muttered, snapping photos. Emily recorded everything on a concealed camera, her heart pounding. Jim froze, hearing a faint hum, a generator maybe or a truck. Max's ears pricked, and he growled, his body tensing. Before they could retreat, floodlights snapped on, blinding them. Armed men in black tactical gear emerged. From the shadows, weapons raised. "Drop your gear," one shouted. Mike drew his pistol, but Jim grabbed his arm. "Not yet." A man stepped forward, his face hidden by a balaclava. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice cold. Max bared his teeth, ready to lunge, but Jim held his leash tight. The leader raised his gun, aiming at Jim. "You're supposed to be dead, Captain." In a flash, Max broke free, leaping at the leader and sinking his teeth into the man's arm. Chaos erupted. Gunfire echoed through the warehouse, bullets sparking off metal. Mike tackled another gunman, while Emily dug behind a crate, clutching her camera. Jim, still weak, fought with everything he had, disarming a mercenary with a swift strike. Max darted between enemies, barking and biting, giving the group a chance to regroup. They scrambled for the exit, Max covering their retreat. But as they reached the door, a shot rang out. Max yelped, stumbling, blood staining his fur. Jim's heart stopped. "Max!" he screamed, rushing to his side. The dog struggled to stand, whimpering but defiant. Mike fired back, forcing the mercenaries to take cover, and Emily helped Jim carry Max to the truck. They sped away, Max lying across Jim's lap, his breathing labored. Emily's hands shook as she tried to stop the bleeding. "Hang on, Max," Jim whispered, tears in his eyes. "You're not done yet." The warehouse faded into the distance, but the danger was far from over. They had evidence, photos, footage, proof of Shadow Syndicate's operations, but at what cost? As they raced towards safety, Mike's phone buzzed with a message from his contact. "Asterisk Vance knows you're alive. He's coming for you." Asterisk Jim looked at Max, fighting for life, and then at Emily and Mike. They were in deeper than ever, and Shadow Syndicate was closing in. What would they find next? And could Max survive to see justice served? Chapter For the Price of Truth. The truck roared to the foggy Virginia backroads, its tires screeching as Mike Torres pushed it to its limits. In the back seat, Captain Jim Carter cradled Max, his loyal German shepherd, whose blood-soaked fur stained Jim's hands. Max's breathing was shallow, his eyes half closed, but he still managed a weak whimper, nuzzling Jim's arm. Emily Hayes pressed a makeshift bandage against Max's wound, her hands trembling. "Hold on, Max," she whispered, her voice breaking. "We're almost there." It was the early morning of May 25th, 2025, and the weight of their narrow escape from the Shadow Syndicate's warehouse pressed heavily on the group. They had evidence, photos of military-grade weapons, footage of the mercenaries, but at a terrible cost. Jim's eyes burned with tears as he stroked Max's head. "You saved us, buddy. Just stay with me." Mike glanced back, his face grim. "There's a vet clinic 10 minutes out. We'll get him help." The clinic was a small, run-down building on the edge of Manassas. They burst through the doors, Jim carrying Max as Emily shouted for help. A veterinarian, startled but quick to act, rushed Max into surgery. Sarah Carter, who had been waiting anxiously at the safe house, arrived soon after, her face pale with fear. "Is he going to make it?" she asked, clutching Jim's arm. Jim couldn't answer, his throat tight. Max had saved his life, and now it was his turn to fight for his loyal companion. While the vet worked, the group huddled in the safe house, a cramped DC apartment bathed in the dim glow of a single lamp. Emily uploaded the warehouse footage to a secure server, her fingers flying across her laptop. "This is bigger than we thought," she said, her voice low. The crates had serial numbers tied to Pentagon contracts. Vance isn't just trafficking weapons, he's diverting them from military stockpiles. She pulled up a grainy photo of Colonel Richard Vance, his stern face staring back from a Pentagon profile. He's got access to classified ops, funding everything. Mike slammed a fist on the table. That bastard tried to kill Jim to cover this up, and now he knows we're onto him. His phone buzzed again, another message from his contact. "Vance is mobilizing. Watch your back." Jim, still weak from his ordeal, stood and paced, his eyes fierce. "We can't wait. If Shadow Syndicate is planning an attack, we need to expose them now." Emily hesitated. "We got evidence, but it's not enough to take down someone like Vance. We need a witness, a paper trail, something undeniable." She turned to Jim. "You said you overheard Vance talking about a militia. Any names? Locations?" Jim rubbed his temples, struggling to recall. There was a name, Red Dawn. They mentioned a meetup, somewhere in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Soon. Sarah, sitting quietly, spoke up, her voice steady despite her worry for Max. "You're all risking your lives. I've already lost Jim once. I can't lose you again." Jim knelt beside her, his voice soft but resolute. "Mom, if we don't stop Vance, thousands to die. I have to do this. For Max, for everyone." Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes, and handed him a small cross necklace. "For luck," she whispered. The vet emerged, her face somber. "Max is stable, but it's touch and go. The bullet misses heart. but he's lost a lot of blood. He needs rest. Jim exhaled, relief mixed with dread. Max wasn't out of danger, but he was alive. For now, the group agreed to leave Max at the clinic, knowing they couldn't risk bringing him on their next move. Emily's analysis pinpointed a possible location for the Red Dawn militia meetup, an abandoned lodge in the Blue Ridge Mountains, known for shady dealings. If we can get there, we might catch Vance's men in the act, she said. Mike loaded his gear, pistols, a rifle, and a drone for recon. We go in quiet, get proof, and get out. No mistakes. Jim nodded, slipping Sarah's necklace around his neck. Let's end this. The drive to the mountains was tense, the fog thickening as they climbed higher. The lodge loomed ahead, a dilapidated structure surrounded by dense pines. They parked a mile out, moving stealthily through the forest. Mike's drone buzzed overhead, capturing grainy footage of armed men unloading crates from a black SUV. Emily whispered, "That's them? Shadow Syndicate." Jim handed Max's leash to Sarah back at the safe house, but he could almost feel the dog's presence, urging him forward. They crept closer, hiding behind a ridge. Emily set up a long-range camera, recording as men in tactical gear exchanged briefcases with militia members wearing red armbands. Red Dawn. Jim's heart raced. "That's enough to tie Vance to the militia," he whispered. But before they could retreat, a twig snapped under Mike's boot. A militia guard spun around, spotting them. "Intruders!" he shouted. Gunfire erupted, shattering the mountain silence. Mike returned fire, taking down 2 guards, while Jim and Emily dove for cover. The militia was well trained, moving with military precision. Jim fought through his weakness, his training kicking in as he disarmed a gunman. Emily scrambled to protect her camera, the evidence their only hope. But the Syndicate's men were closing in, their numbers overwhelming. In the chaos, Mike pushed Jim and Emily toward the tree line. "Go! Get the footage out!" he shouted, firing to cover their escape. A bullet struck Mike's shoulder, then another his chest. He stumbled, blood soaking his jacket, but kept shooting, giving them time. Jim screamed, "Mike, no!" But Emily dragged him away, tears streaming down her face. "We can't lose you too." They reached the truck, hearts pounding as the gunfire faded. Mike's sacrifice burned in Jim's chest, a wound deeper than any bullet. Emily clutched the camera, her hands shaking. "We've got the evidence, Jim. Mike didn't die for nothing." But the cost was unbearable. Jim slammed his fist against the dashboard, his voice raw. "Vance will pay for this." Back at the safe house, Sarah gasped at the sight of them, battered and grieving. "Where's Mike?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jim couldn't meet her eyes. "He's gone, Mom." Sarah sank into a chair, sobbing, as Emily uploaded the footage to a secure server. The images were damning. Shadow Syndicate and Red Dawn, caught in the act. But Vance's warning loomed. He was coming for them. As dawn broke, a call came through from General Laura Bennett, a trusted officer Mike had contacted before the raid. "I've seen your evidence," she said, her voice grave. "Vance is moving fast. He's got men hunting you. Meet me at a secure location in D.C. We'll plan the next step." Jim nodded, his resolve hardening. But before he could respond, a crash echoed outside the safe house. Headlights pierced the morning fog, and armed men emerged from black SUVs. Sarah screamed, clutching Jim. Emily grabbed her laptop, ready to run. The door splintered as Boots kicked it in. Vance's men were here, and there was nowhere to hide. Had Mike's sacrifice been in vain? And could they protect the evidence before it's too late? Chapter 5, The Breaking Point. The safe house in Washington, D.C. was a fortress of shadows, its dim light flickering as the dawn of May 25th, 2025, broke through the fog. Inside, Jim Carter, Emily Hayes, and Sarah Carter stood frozen, their hearts pounding as the front door splintered under the force of heavy boots. Black SUVs blocked the street outside, their headlights slicing through the morning mist. Colonel Richard Vance's mercenaries, armed and ruthless, had found them. The evidence of Shadow Syndicate's treason, photos, footage, and documents, was their only weapon, and it was now at risk. "Get down!" Jim shouted, pulling Sarah behind a couch. Emily clutched her laptop, the precious footage of the militia deal still uploading to a secure server. The door burst open, and 3 men in tactical gear stormed in, their rifles raised. "Hand over the drive," one barked, his voice cold. Jim's eyes darted to the window. More men were circling the building. They were trapped. Emily, her face pale but resolute, whispered, "The upload's at 80%. We just need a few more minutes." Jim nodded, his special forces training kicking in despite his weakened state. He grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, the only weapon within reach. "Keep them talking," he told Emily, his voice low. Sarah, trembling, clutched the cross necklace she'd given Jim, her lips moving in silent prayer. "Hey!" Jim called out, stepping into view with his hands raised, the knife hidden behind his back. "We don't have what you want. Let's talk this out." The lead mercenary sneered, stepping closer. "You're a dead man walking, Carter. Vance wants that footage, and he wants you gone, for good this time." Before the man could react, Jim lunged, driving the knife into his arm. The mercenary roared, dropping his rifle. Emily seized a moment, grabbing a chair and smashing it over another gunman's head. Sarah, fueled by desperation, threw a lamp at the third, buying them seconds. Jim wrestled the first mercenary to the ground, disarming him, but more men poured in from the back door. Emily, the laptop. Jim yelled. She dove for the device, the upload bar ticking to 95%. Bullets tore through the walls, shattering glass and splintering wood. Jim fired the stolen rifle, forcing the mercenaries to take cover. Sarah screamed, ducking as a bullet grazed her shoulder. "Mom!" Jim shouted, rushing to her side. Blood seeped through her sleeve, but she waved him off, her voice fierce. "I'm fine. Protect the evidence." Emily's laptop pinged. The upload was complete. "It's done!" she cried, slipping the device into a backpack. Jim grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a side window. "We're leaving now." He helped Sarah climb out, her face pale with pain. They stumbled into an alley, the sounds of gunfire and shouts echoing behind them. The mercenaries were relentless, their boots pounding closer. Jim led them through DC's backstreets, weaving between buildings to lose their pursuers. Emily clutched the backpack, her breath ragged. "The footage is on the server, but we need to get it to someone we trust." Jim nodded, his mind racing. "General Bennett. She's our only shot." They had arranged to meet Bennett at a secure location near the Lincoln Memorial, but with Vance's men on their tail, every step felt like a gamble. They reached a crowded market, blending into the early morning bustle. Sarah's wound was slowing her down, and Jim's own strength was fading, his body still recovering from being buried alive. Emily scanned the crowd, her eyes catching a glint of metal, a mercenary in plain clothes watching them. "Jim, we've got company," she whispered. Before they could move, the man raised a radio, signaling others. Jim cursed under his breath. "We can't outrun them. We need a diversion." He spotted a delivery truck idling nearby, its driver unloading crates. Thinking fast, he slipped behind the truck, hot wiring it in seconds, a skill from his covert ops days. "Get in," he shouted. Emily helped Sarah into the passenger seat as Jim floored the gas, the truck lurching forward. The mercenaries gave chase, their SUVs roaring behind. The chase tore through DC streets, tires screeching as Jim swerved through traffic. Bullets pinged off the truck's frame, shattering the rear window. Emily ducked, shielding Sarah, who clutched her bleeding shoulder. "We're not gonna make it," Emily shouted. Jim's jaw tightened. "We have to. For Mike. For Max." At the mention of Max, Jim's heart ached. The German shepherd was still fighting for his life at the vet clinic, and Mike's sacrifice burned fresh in his mind. He couldn't let their losses be in vain. He veered onto a side street, narrowly avoiding an oncoming car, and spotted a construction site ahead. "Hold on," he yelled, steering the truck through a gap in the fencing. The vehicle crashed through wooden barriers, kicking up dust and debris, slowing the pursuing SUVs. They abandoned the truck, scrambling through the site toward the Lincoln Memorial. Emily sent a coded message to General Bennett. Asterisk evidence secure. Meet at rendezvous. Under attack. Asterisk as they neared the memorial. The massive statue of Lincoln loomed above, a symbol of hope amid their desperation. But the mercenaries were closing in, their shouts echoing through the morning air. Bennett's black SUV pulled up, and the general herself stepped out, flanked by two trusted officers. "Carter, get in," she barked. Jim helped Sarah into the vehicle. Emily followed with the backpack. But as they climbed in, a sniper's bullet whizzed past, grazing Jim's arm. He grunted, blood seeping through his sleeve, but pushed forward. Bennett's officers returned fire, forcing the mercenaries back. Inside the SUV, Bennett's face was grim. "I've seen your footage. It's explosive, but Vance has allies in high places. We need to get this to the press fast." Emily nodded, pulling out her laptop. "It's ready to go public. I just need a secure line." Sarah, wincing in pain, whispered, "Do it for Mike, for all of us." As Emily prepared to leak the footage, a call came through from the vet clinic. Jim's heart stopped as the vet's voice crackled over the line. "I'm sorry, Captain Carter. Max didn't make it. He fought hard, but the blood loss was too much." Jim's world tilted, grief crashing over him like a wave. Max, the dog who had saved his life, was gone. Sarah sobbed, clutching Jim's hand, while Emily's eyes filled with tears. Bennett placed a hand on Jim's shoulder. "He was a hero. We'll honor him by finishing this." Jim's voice was raw, barely a whisper. "Vance took everything, like Max. He's not taking anything else." He turned to Emily, his eyes blazing. "Send the footage. Now!" Emily nodded, hitting the upload button. The evidence, proof of Shadow Syndicate's treason, was now streaming to every major news outlet unstoppable. But the SUV's radio crackled with a new threat. A voice, cold and familiar, cut through. "You think you won, Carter? This isn't over." It was Vance. The mercenaries were regrouping, and the safe house attack was just the beginning. As Bennett floored the gas, speeding toward a secure facility, Jim looked out the window, the city blurring past. Max's sacrifice, Mike's death, they fueled his resolve. But Vance was coming, and the final battle was yet to come. Could they survive long enough to see justice? Chapter 6, The General's Gambit. The black SUV roared through the streets of Washington, D.C., its tires humming against the wet pavement as dawn broke on May 25th, 2025. Inside, Captain Jim Carter sat beside his mother, Sarah, whose shoulder was bandaged but still seeped blood. Emily Hayes clutched her laptop, the uploaded evidence of Shadow Syndicate's treason, now spreading like wildfire across news outlets. General Laura Bennett, a steely officer with decades of service, gripped the wheel, her face set with determination. Colonel Richard Vance's chilling radio threat echoed in their minds. Asterisk, this isn't over. Asterisk, the fight for justice had cost them dearly. Mike Torres and Max, the loyal German shepherd. But the battle was far from won. Jim's arm throbbed where a sniper's bullet had grazed him. But the pain was nothing compared to the grief gnawing at his heart. Max's death, confirmed by the vet, felt like losing a piece of his soul. Mike's sacrifice burned even deeper, a reminder of the price they'd paid to expose Vance. Sarah, pale but resolute, squeezed Jim's hand. "We're still here, son, for them." Jim nodded, his jaw tight. "We end this today." Bennett glanced back. Her voice clipped. "The footage is out, but Vance's allies in Pentagon. He'll try to spin this, bury the truth. We need to make a public stand. Somewhere he can't silence us." Emily, her eyes red from tears, spoke up. "I've got contacts at a major news network. They're ready to air a live broadcast if we can get to their studio." Bennett nodded. "Good. We'll head to the National Press Building. It's a fensible public, and Vance won't dare attack openly." The SUV pulled into an underground garage near the press building, where Bennett's trusted officers waited. They escorted the group inside, moving swiftly through service corridors to avoid Vance's spies. Sarah winced with each step, her wounds slowing her, but she refused to stay behind. "I've lost too much," she said, her voice fierce. "I'm seeing this through." In a secure conference room, Emily connected her laptop to the network's broadcast system. The footage, crates of weapons, Red Dawn militia and Shadow Syndicate's dealings, played on a monitor, undeniable proof of Vance's treason. A news anchor, a veteran journalist named Rachel Cole, joined them, her expression grave. "This is explosive," she said. "We'll go live in 20 minutes. But Vance's people are already spreading disinformation, claiming the footage is fake." Jim's fists clenched. "Then we tell the truth ourselves. I'll go on air, tell the world what Vance did to me, to Mike, to Max." Emily hesitated, touching his arm. "Jim, if you do this, you'll be a target. Vance won't stop until you're dead." Jim met her gaze, his voice steady. "I'm already a target. This is bigger than me." Bennett outlined the plan. Jim would speak live, backed by the footage, while her team secured the building. "We got a small unit, loyal officers I trust," she said. "But Vance's mercenaries are well funded. If they come, it'll be a fight." Sarah, sitting with a first aid kit, looked up. "What about me? I'm no soldier, but I can help." Bennett smiled faintly. "You've got heart, Sarah. Stay with Emily, keep her safe. She's our link to the truth." As the broadcast neared, tension filled the room. Emily monitored social media, where the footage was going viral, sparking outrage. Hashtags like #Shadow Syndicate and #JusticeForJim trended, but so did Vance's disinformation, accusing Jim of desertion. Rachel Cole prepared her questions, her voice calm but urgent. "We're live in 5. This could change everything." Outside, the city buzzed with morning traffic, unaware of the storm brewing. Bennett's officers reported movement, suspicious vehicles circling the block. Jim strapped on a borrowed vest, his body aching but his resolve unbreakable. He thought of Max, his loyal companion, and Mike, who gave his life for this moment. "For you," he whispered, touching the cross necklace Sarah had given him. The broadcast began. Rachel Cole faced the camera, her voice steady. "Tonight, we bring you a story of betrayal and courage. Captain Jim Carter, presumed dead, is here to expose conspiracy threatening our nation." Jim stepped into the spotlight, his face haggard but determined. He recounted his mission, Vance's betrayal, and the attempt to bury him alive. He spoke of Mike's sacrifice and Max's heroism, his voice breaking as he described the German Shepherd's final fight. The footage played, undeniable, as millions watched. But as Jim spoke, Bennett's radio crackled. Hostiles approaching, multiple units, heavily armed. The general's eyes narrowed. "They're here. Hold the perimeter." Gunfire erupted outside, muffled but growing closer. Sarah gasped, clutching Emily, who kept the broadcast running. "We can't stop now," Emily said, her fingers trembling on the keyboard. The studio doors shook as mercenaries breached the building. Bennett's officers fought back, their shouts and gunfire echoing through the halls. Jim grabbed a pistol from an officer, his special forces instincts kicking in. "Emily, keep the feed live," he shouted, moving to barricade the door. Sarah, despite her injury, helped stack chairs, her face set with defiance. "No one's silencing my son." The mercenaries blasted through the outer defenses, their boots pounding closer. A grenade exploded in the hallway, shaking the walls. Bennett fired through the door, taking down 2 attackers, but more poured in. "We're outnumbered," she yelled. Jim returned fire, his arm bleeding anew, but his aim was steady. Emily's screen showed the broadcast reaching millions, the truth spreading faster than Vance could contain. Rachel Cole, unflinching, continued narrating live. "We're under attack, but the truth will not be silenced." The camera caught glimpses of the chaos. Jim fighting, Sarah shielding Emily, Bennett leading the defense. The world watched, horrified and inspired, as the small team held their ground. But the mercenaries were relentless. A bullet struck Bennett's leg, and she staggered, blood pooling beneath her. "Keep the broadcast going," she gasped, handing Jim her radio. "Call for backup. Pentagon loyalists on their way." Jim relayed the message, his voice urgent, as Emily sent a final encrypted signal to Bennett's allies. The studio door buckled, and a towering mercenary burst in, his rifle aimed at Jim. Sarah, in a surge of maternal fury, threw herself forward, knocking a tripod into the man's legs. He stumbled, giving Jim a split second to tackle him. The fight was brutal hand to hand as the broadcast continued, the world witnessing their struggle. Just as the mercenaries closed in, sirens wailed outside. Backup, Bennett's loyal Pentagon unit, stormed the building, their gunfire overwhelming Vance's men. The attackers faltered, some retreating, others falling. Jim helped Bennett to her feet, her face pale but defiant. "We held the line," she said, her voice weak. The broadcast ended, the footage now etched in the public's mind. Vance's empire was crumbling, but he was still out there, a shadow waiting to strike. Emily checked her laptop. News outlets were demanding investigations, and the Pentagon was in chaos. Sarah, bloody but unbroken, hugged Jim tightly. "You did it, son." But Jim's eyes were distant, haunted by loss. Max, Mike, and now Bennett's injuries. They paid a heavy price. The radio crackled again, a new message from an unknown source. "Astor's Vance is at his estate. End this now." Astor's Jim looked at Emily and Sarah, his resolve hardening. The final battle was coming, but would they have the strength to face it? Chapter 7, The Traitor's Stronghold. The sun hung low over the Virginia countryside, casting long shadows across the sprawling estate of Colonel Richard Vance. On May 25th, 2025, the air was thick with tension as General Laura Bennett's convoy of armored vehicles sped toward their target. Inside one SUV, Captain Jim Carter sat, his arm bandaged from a sniper's graze, his eyes burning with purpose. Beside him, Emily Hayes clutched her laptop, the evidence of Shadow Syndicate's treason now a global sensation. Sarah Carter, her shoulder wound hastily patched, sat in silence, her face a mix of fear and resolve. The losses of Max, their loyal German shepherd, and Mike Torres weighed heavily, but Vance's final reckoning was at hand. Bennett, her leg wrapped from a bullet wound, briefed the team via radio. Vance's estate is a fortress, private security, surveillance, and likely a small army of syndicate mercenaries. Our intel says he's holed up inside, planning his next move. We hit hard, take him alive if possible, and secure any evidence of his network. Her voice was steady, but the stakes were clear. Failure meant Vance could escape, his conspiracy thriving in the shadows. Jim gripped the cross necklace Sarah had given him, his voice low. He took Mike. He took Max. He doesn't walk away from this. Emily touched his hand, her eyes fierce. We've got the world watching, Jim. The footage is out, but we need Vance to seal the case. Sarah, her voice soft but firm, added, "Do this for justice, not revenge, son." Jim nodded, his resolve hardening. This wasn't just personal. It was for the country Max and Mike had died to protect. The convoy stopped a mile from this state, hidden by dense woods. Bennett's team, a dozen loyal Pentagon officers, fanned out, equipped with rifles and drones. Emily hacked into the state security feed, her laptop screen showing guards patrolling the perimeter. "They're on high alert," she whispered, "but I've looped their cameras for 10 minutes. That's our window." Jim checked his pistol, his body aching but his focus razor sharp. "Let's move." Under cover of dusk, the team advanced, slipping through the woods like ghosts. The estate loomed ahead, a mansion of stone and glass surrounded by high walls and floodlights. Bennett signaled for 2 officers to disable the gate's power, plunging perimeter into darkness. The team breached the wall, cutting through barbed wire and entered the grounds. Emily's drone buzzed overhead, mapping the layout, guards at every entrance, snipers on the roof. Jim led a small group toward a side entrance, Emily at his side. Memories of Max flashed through his mind, the dog's fierce loyalty, his final leap to save them. "This is for you, buddy," Jim muttered, kicking open the door. Inside, the mansion was a maze of marble and shadows, its opulence a stark contrast to Vance's treachery. The team moved silently, neutralizing 2 guards with swift, precise strikes. Emily's laptop pinged, detecting a secure server room nearby. "If Vance has records of Shadow Syndicate's deals, they're in there," she said. They reached the room, a steel door guarded by a keypad. Emily plugged in a decryption device, her fingers trembling as the seconds ticked by. The door clicked open, revealing racks of computers and files. She began downloading data, names, bank accounts, shipment logs, proof of Vance's global network. But their time was up. Alarms blared, red lights flashing through the mansion. "They've spotted us." Bennett's voice crackled over the radio. Outside, gunfire erupted as her team clashed with Syndicate mercenaries. Jim grabbed Emily, pulling her toward the door. "We've got what we need. Let's find Vance." They rejoined Bennett's unit, now pinned down in the mansion's grand foyer, bullets tearing through chandeliers and marble. Vance's voice boomed over an intercom, cold and mocking. "You're fools, Carter. You think you can stop me? Shadow Syndicate is bigger than you know." Jim's blood boiled, but he stayed focused, firing back at mercenaries advancing from a staircase. Emily uploaded the server data to a secure cloud, her voice urgent. "It's going out. Every agency will have this now." Bennett, limping but defiant, rallied her team, pushed forward. Vance is in the upper levels. They fought their way up a spiral staircase, the air thick with smoke and the stench of gunpowder. Jim took a graze to his leg, gritting his teeth as he pressed on. Sarah, who had insisted on joining despite her injury, stayed close to Emily, her presence a quiet strength. "Keep going, Jim," she whispered, her eyes fierce. At the top, they reached a fortified office, its door reinforced with steel. Bennett's officers set a breaching charge, the explosion shaking the walls. Inside, Van stood behind a desk, his face calm but his eyes wild with desperation. 2 elite mercenaries flanked him, their weapons trained on the team. "You're too late," Van sneered. "My allies are already moving. You'll never stop what's coming." Jim stepped forward, his pistol raised. "It's over, Vance. The world knows what you've done." Vance laughed, a hollow sound. "You think a broadcast changes anything? power doesn't bend to truth. He signaled his men, and the room erupted in chaos. Jim dove for cover, firing at one mercenary while Bennett tackled the other. Emily shielded Sarah, her laptop falling as bullets flew. In the melee, Van slipped through a hidden panel in the wall, disappearing into a secret passage. Jim pursued, his leg burning, but his rage driving him forward. The passage led to a rooftop helipad, where a chopper's blades were already spinning. Vance climbed aboard, his face twisted with triumph. "You lose, Carter," he shouted over the roar. Jim sprinted, ignoring the pain, and leaped, grabbing the chopper's skid as it lifted off. The pilot swerved, trying to shake him, but Jim clung on, his muscles screaming. Below, Bennett's team secured the office, capturing the remaining mercenaries. Emily and Sarah watched in horror as the chopper climbed higher, Jim dangling precariously. Inside the chopper, Vance drew a pistol, aiming at Jim through the open door. "You're persistent. I'll give you that," he snarled. Jim's grip slipped, his strength fading. The city lights spun below, a dizzying reminder of what was at stake. Was this the end? Could Jim bring Vance down, or would the traitor escape to unleash his final plan? Chapter 8: Battle in the Sky. The chopper's blade sliced the night air, roaring over the twinkling lights of Washington, D.C. On May 25, 2025, Captain Jim Carter clung to the landing skid, his muscles screaming as the wind tore at him. Blood dripped from his grazed arm and leg, his strength fading with every second. Inside the helicopter, Colonel Richard Vance aimed a pistol at him, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "You should have stayed, Barry. Carter," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the thumping rotors. Jim's grip slipped, the city spinning below, but the faces of Max, Mike, and his mother Sarah fueled his resolve. This was his last chance to stop Shadow Syndicate. Below, at Vance's fortified estate in the Virginia countryside, General Laura Bennett rallied her battered team. Her leg wound slowed her, but her command was unshaken. Emily Hayes, clutching the downloaded data from Vance's servers, stood beside Sarah Carter, whose shoulder bled through its bandage. The mansion was a war zone. Smoke billowed from shattered windows, and the bodies of syndicate mercenaries littered the grounds. Bennett's loyal Pentagon unit had secured the estate, but stragglers still fought, and the risk of reinforcements loomed. "Carter's on that chopper," Bennett barked into her radio, her voice hoarse. "We need air support now." Emily, her hands trembling, checked her laptop. The server data, exposing Shadow Syndicate's global network, was now with every major intelligence agency. "The truth is out," she said, her voice fierce. "But if Jim doesn't stop Vance, he'll disappear." Sarah, pale but defiant, gripped Emily's arm. "My son won't let that happen." Up in the chopper, Jim's fingers dug into the skid, his body battered by the wind. Vance leaned out, his pistol gleaming under the chopper's lights. "You're nothing, Carter. Shadow Syndicate will outlive us both." He fired, the bullet grazing Jim's shoulder, sending a jolt of pain through him. Jim grunted, nearly losing his grip, but adrenaline surged. With a desperate heave, he swung his body up, grabbing the doorframe and pulling himself inside. Vance lunged, slamming the pistol against Jim's temple. The blow dazed him, stars exploding in his vision, but Jim fought back, tackling Vance to the floor. The chopper lurched as the pilot struggled to stabilize it, the controls rattling. "You're done, Vance." Jim growled, pinning the colonel's arm. The pistol skidded across the floor, out of reach. Vance laughed, a manic edge to his voice. "You think this ends with me? My allies are in the government, the military, everywhere." Jim's fist connected with Vance's jaw, silencing him. "Then we'll root them out one by one." He wrestled Vance into a chokehold, his strength waning, but his will unbreakable. The pilot, A syndicate loyalist drew a knife and charged. Jim kicked him hard, sending him crashing into the controls. The chopper spun wildly, alarms blaring as it began to descend toward the Potomac River. On the ground, Bennett's team spotted the chopper's erratic path. "It's going down!" an officer shouted. Emily's heart sank. Her eyes locked on the spiraling lights. "Jim!" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Sarah clutched her cross necklace, praying silently. Bennett radioed for a rescue team, her voice urgent. "Get to the river. Carter's on board." In the chopper, Jim tightened his hold on Vance, who gasped for air, his face red. "You can't stop what's coming," Vance choked out. Jim's eyes burned with fury. "Watch me." With a final effort, he knocked Vance unconscious, securing him with a cargo strap. The chopper was plummeting now, the river's dark waters rushing closer. Jim staggered to the pilot, who was slumped over, blood dripping from a head wound. The controls were a maze of flashing warnings, but Jim had trained for emergencies like this. He grabbed the stick, fighting to level the chopper. Come on, he muttered, sweat and blood mixing on his face. The altimeter spun downward, 500 feet, 300, 100. With a bone-rattling jolt, he pulled up, skimming the chopper just above the water. The skids grazed the surface, sending spray flying before he managed to stabilize it. Steering toward a nearby riverbank, the chopper crash-landed in a muddy clearing, its blade snapping as it skidded to a halt. Jim coughed, smoke filling the cabin, and dragged Vance's unconscious body out. He collapsed beside the wreckage, his body screaming in pain but alive. Sirens wailed in the distance. Bennett's rescue team was closing in. Jim looked at Vance, bound and defeated, and whispered, "For Max, for Mike." Back at the estate, Emily and Sarah embraced as news of the crash reached them. "He's alive," Emily sobbed, relief flooding her. Bennett, leaning on an officer for support, managed a grim smile. "Carter's tougher than he looks." But her radio crackled with a new report. Syndicate operatives, loyal to Vance's network, were mobilizing in D.C., targeting key officials to destabilize the government. The footage and data had exposed Shadow Syndicate, but its roots ran deep. As rescue teams reached Jim, he stood, battered but unbroken, Vance in custody beside him. The medics patched his wounds, but his eyes were distant, haunted by loss. Emily and Sarah arrived, rushing to his side. Sarah hugged him tightly, tears streaming. "You did it, son." Emily kissed him, her voice trembling. "The world knows the truth now." But Bennett's warning cut through the reunion. "This isn't over," she said, her face grave. "Vance was just ahead. Shadow Syndicate's allies are still out there, and they'll come for revenge." Jim looked at the city skyline, its lights a beacon of hope and danger. He thought of Max's loyalty, Mike's sacrifice, and the fight still ahead. Could they dismantle the Syndicate's network before it struck back? And what new threats waited in the shadows? Chapter 9, The Cost of Justice. The muddy clearing by the Potomac River buzzed with activity as rescue teams swarmed the wreckage of Colonel Richard Vance's crashed helicopter. It was the early morning of May 26, 2025, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke and river water. Captain Jim Carter stood, battered and bloody, his eyes fixed on Vance, who knelt in cuffs, surrounded by General Laura Bennett's loyal Pentagon officers. The traitor's empire, Shadow Syndicate, was crumbling, its secrets exposed to the world. But Jim's heart was heavy. Max, his loyal German shepherd, and Mike Torres, his best friend, had paid the ultimate price for this victory. Emily Hayes ran to Jim, her face streaked with tears of relief. She threw her arms around him, her voice trembling. "You made it." Sarah Carter, limping from her shoulder wound, joined them, her eyes shining with pride and sorrow. "My boy," she whispered, hugging Jim tightly. General Bennett, leaning on a crutch, approached, her face grim but resolute. Vance is in custody, and the data you sent is with every agency, FBI, CIA, Interpol. Shadow Syndicate's network is being dismantled as we speak. Jim nodded, but his gaze lingered on Vance, whose defiant smirk hadn't faded. "It's not over," Jim said, his voice low. He said his allies are everywhere, government, military. We've only cut off the head. Bennett's jaw tightened. "You're right, we've got names with servers, but rooting out his operatives will take time, and they'll come for revenge." The team returned to a secure Pentagon facility, where medics treated their wounds. Emily uploaded the final batch of Vance's server data, revealing a chilling truth. Shadow Syndicate had planned a coordinated attack on federal buildings, timed to destabilize the government during a national crisis. The broadcast, watched by millions, had forced the plot into the open, prompting swift action. Arrests were underway across D.C., but some operatives had gone underground, and whispers of a counterstrike grew louder. Sarah, bandaged but unbowed, sat beside Jim in facility's briefing room. "You've done more than enough, son. Let others take it from here." Jim shook his head, his voice raw. "Max died for this. Mike died for this. I can't walk away until it's finished." Emily, her laptop open, added, "The public's on our side. Protests are forming outside the Pentagon, demanding accountability. We've started something bigger than us." Bennett entered, her face pale from pain but her authority unshaken. "We've got a lead on a syndicate safe house in Baltimore, a hub for their remaining operatives. If we hit it now, we can cripple their retaliation plans." She looked at Jim, her eyes searching. "You're not obligated, Carter. You've given enough." Jim stood, his wounds aching but his resolve ironclad. "I'm in." Emily volunteered to join, her forensic skills crucial for securing evidence. Sarah, though reluctant, stayed behind, promising to monitor news reports and keep the pressure on. "Come back to me," she whispered, pressing her cross necklace into Jim's hand. He kissed her forehead, a silent vow. The raid on the Baltimore safe house was swift and brutal. Bennett's team, bolstered by FBI tactical units, stormed a nondescript warehouse by the docks. Jim and Emily moved with the advance team, their vests heavy, their senses sharp. Inside, they found computers, weapons, and encrypted communications, proof of a planned counterattack. But the syndicate operatives were ready, ambushing the team with gunfire and explosives. Jim fought through the chaos, his training guiding him as bullets sparked off metal. Emily, crouched behind a crate, hacked into the safe house's network, downloading files that named syndicate allies in high places, senators, generals, even corporate CEOs. "This is it," she shouted, her voice drowned by gunfire. Jim covered her, taking down two operatives with precise shots, but a grenade rolled toward them, its fuse hissing. "Move!" Jim yelled, shoving Emily out of the way. The explosion rocked the warehouse, shrapnel grazing Jim's side. He grunted, blood soaking his vest, but kept fighting, dragging Emily to safety. Bennett's team pushed forward, overwhelming the operatives, and the warehouse fell silent, its defenders dead or captured. Emily's download was complete, the names now with federal authorities, ensuring no one could hide. As the team regrouped, Jim staggered, his vision blurring from blood loss. Emily caught him, her face pale. "Stay with me, Jim." Medics rushed in, stabilizing him as Bennett secured the scene. The data was a death blow to Shadow Syndicate's remnants, but the cost was etched in Jim's scars and the team's haunted eyes. Vance was in custody, his network exposed, but the fight had taken everything: friends, family, and pieces of their souls. Back at the Pentagon, Jim recovered in a medical bay, Emily and Sarah by his side. News reports blared. Vance faced trial. His allies were being arrested, and the nation demanded reform. Bennett visited, her crutch clicking on the floor. "You've given us a chance to rebuild, Carter. The country owes you." Jim shook his head, his voice quiet. "It wasn't just me. It was Max, Mike. All of us." Sarah smiled through tears, her hand on Jim's. "You made them proud." Emily, her laptop closed for the first time in days, leaned against Jim. "We did it together." But Bennett's warning lingered. Some syndicate operatives remain at large, shadows waiting for their moment. Jim looked out the window, the DC skyline a reminder of the fragile peace they'd won. Had they truly ended the threat? Or was one final challenge waiting? Chapter 10: A Hero's Legacy. The Pentagon Secure Medical Bay was a haven of quiet amidst the chaos of Washington, D.C. on the evening of May 26, 2025. Captain Jim Carter lay in a hospital bed, his side bandaged from shrapnel wounds sustained in the Baltimore raid. The pain was dull compared to the ache in his heart. Max, his loyal German shepherd, and Mike Torres, his best friend, were gone, their sacrifices etched into every moment of this hard-won victory. Beside him, Emily Hayes held his hand, her eyes tired but bright with resolve. Sarah Carter, her shoulder wound healing, sat nearby, her face a mix of relief and pride. Shadow's syndicate was crumbling, but the cost had been unimaginable. General Laura Bennett, still on crutches, entered the room, her expression a blend of exhaustion and triumph. "It's over, Carter," she said, her voice steady. "The data from Baltimore, names, accounts, plans, has triggered a nationwide sweep. Syndicate operatives are being rounded up from D.C. to London. Colonel Vance is facing a military tribunal, and his allies in government are under investigation." She paused, her eyes softening. "You did this. All of you." Jim shook his head, his voice hoarse. "Not just us. Max started it, digging up the truth. Mike gave his life to get us here." Sarah's eyes glistened, and she touched the cross necklace now back around her neck. "They're heroes, Jim, and so are you." Emily squeezed his hand, her voice quiet. "The world knows their story now. It's changing things." The broadcast and leaked data had ignited a firestorm. Protests outside the Pentagon demanded transparency, and news outlets hailed Jim as a whistleblower who'd expose a traitor's empire. But fame fell hollow to Jim. He thought of Max's fierce loyalty, Mike's unwavering courage, and the countless others endangered by Shadow Syndicate schemes. "What happens next?" he asked Bennett. "We rebuild," she replied. "The Pentagon's cleaning house, and the public won't let this fade. But some syndicate remnants are still out there, underground. We'll need people like you to stay vigilant." Jim nodded, but his gaze drifted to Emily and Sarah. He'd fought for justice, but now he craved peace for them, for himself. Days later, Jim was discharged, his wounds healing but his scars a permanent reminder. The team returned to Arlington, Virginia, where a small ceremony was held at the National Cemetery. A bronze statue of Max was unveiled, his likeness captured mid-stride, head high, as if still leading the way. The inscription read, "Max, loyal companion, who dug for truth." Sarah placed a wreath at its base, tears streaming. "Thank you, Max," she whispered. Jim knelt beside the statue, his hand resting on the bronze. "You saved me, buddy. Always will." Emily stood beside him, her voice soft. "Mike would have loved this. He'd say Max deserves a medal." Jim managed a faint smile, the first in days. "He'd say Max deserves too." The crowd, soldiers, civilians, and reporters applauded, their respect a tribute to the dog and the man who'd given everything. Bennett approached, offering Jim a folder. "The president wants to award you the Medal of Honor," she said. "You've earned it." Jim looked at Sarah and Emily, then shook his head. Get it to Max and Mike. I just want to go home. Bennett nodded, understanding. You got a place in D.C. if you ever change your mind. Jim, Emily, and Sarah left the city, settling in a quiet farmhouse in rural Virginia. The rolling hills and open fields were a far cry from the chaos of their fight. Emily took a job teaching cybersecurity, her skills now shaping the next generation. Sarah tended a garden, her strength returning with each new bloom. Jim, still healing, found solace in simplicity of the land, his days spent repairing fences and walking the fields. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jim sat on the porch with a new companion, a young German shepherd puppy named Bella, a gift from Bennett. Bella nuzzled his hand, her eyes bright with the same loyalty Max had shown. Sarah joined him, a cup of tea in hand. "You think it's really over?" she asked, her voice soft. Jim looked at the horizon where the last light faded. "For now," he said, "but if trouble comes, we'll be ready." Emily stepped out, her laptop closed for once. "The news says Vance's trial is starting. The syndicate's done." Jim nodded, but Bennett's warning echoed. Some shadows remained. He patted Bella, feeling a spark of hope. Max and Mike had lit the way, and their legacy would endure. As the stars emerged, Jim stood, Bella at his side, and walked into fields. The fight for truth had changed him, but it had also shown him what mattered: family, loyalty, and the courage to stand again. Was the battle truly over, or would new shadows rise? Only time would tell, but for now, Jim Carter was home. Max gave his life. Mike died a hero. Jim Carter exposed the truth and finally found peace. But the shadows still linger. If the story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More untold truths await. Asterisk. Justice was just the beginning.